You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that is honest, reveals the facts, truth, and statistics, and does not mess around. Follow me, Taylor Phillips, on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Email me at TaylorGatorPhillips14@yahoo.com. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313, and go to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth, and join our Facebook group with the same name. The Michigan Sports Truth podcast on Spreaker is also available on iHeartRadio and SoundCloud. Also a subsidiary of Sports Radio Detroit, thus available on iTunes and Podbean. This podcast is particularly not for entertainment purposes, and the views expressed by the host of this podcast are opinion-based. However, they do not come without facts, research, statistics, and truth, whether other people like it or not, and no matter how harsh or complicated it may be. This is the Michigan Sports Truth, and nothing can ever stop it from being correct.
Hey there, Michigan sports fanatics. I'm Taylor Phillips, along with Buck Gino III, actually. He's filling in for Ed Smith tonight. Ed Smith will be back at least tomorrow. This is episode 255 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker. Buck Gino, long time hearing from you. Welcome to the Spreaker airwaves. You and I have been on TalkShoe for quite a few weeks, and now I have introduced you to Spreaker. How's it going?
Very good, Taylor. Thanks for having me. I know that Ed's got some issues with thankfully he's got his power back on. This phone was messing up, but all those folks down there, I know there's still some people without power, and we hope that they get that back soon. But I'm glad to be on, regardless of the situation. Really, there's not a lack of things to talk about. So I think that we probably would be best served if we get started, because there's a lot on the table.
Oh, yeah. You can follow Buck Gino on Twitter at BuckGino III, as in Buck Gino III, and follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Also like the Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth, and join the Facebook group, The Michigan Sports Truth. It is a subsidiary of Sports Radio Detroit. Also listen to that on iTunes and Podbean. Got lots to talk about, including the Michigan Wolverines winning the Big Ten tournament championship.
For three, yes, sir!
Yeah, let's get to that right now. The Wolverines.
Lots to talk about.
Got Pistons, Red Wings, Lions, and Tigers. But the Michigan Wolverines, they led for most of the game, and they led by as many as 9 for most of the second half, and it wore the Badgers out. And everybody stepped up for Michigan, and they just gave Wisconsin the dagger. Wisconsin kept turning the ball over the last 3 minutes of the game, and the Wolverines kept taking advantage. And they led by over 10 points. And the final score of that one was 71-56. They beat the 24th ranked team in the nation. Michigan was the 8th seed in the Big Ten tournament. Wisconsin was 2 seeded. And that wasn't just a surprising that just wasn't a surprising upset. It was a blowout. It ended up in a blowout. It was a closer first half, but the Michigan Wolverines slowly but surely pulled away, and they put the nail in Wisconsin's coffin.
Yeah, it was a very close game at the halftime break, but John Beilein and his troops dug in and got what they had left in that second half and really started to pull away. You mentioned it, Wisconsin really started to turn the ball over with alarming alacrity, so to speak, in the second half, and really started to turn the game around. Michigan's defense, and that's something that's not talked about a lot with Michigan. They're more known specifically for their offense and what they can do offensively if they get hot, which is a valid concern for a team that's going to be playing them in the NCAA tournament, including looking ahead. We don't want to get too far ahead, but that second round matchup with Louisville looming after Michigan's game with Oklahoma State, who they cannot look past at all. Really kind of one of those snakes in the grass. But Michigan's defense really came to play, and I know that Wisconsin, they're going to run their offense. They've run the same offense forever, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But Michigan did a really good job of shutting them down and forcing them into looks that they didn't want. That's one thing that Wisconsin's very good at offensively. They're able to get the looks that they want. And Michigan was able to really start to turn that around, get Wisconsin in uncomfortable situations, and then they were able to turn it up offensively as well, scoring 38 points in the second half. Again, they didn't have a ton of free throws. You look at it, that game was not within the spot or within the reach where they were put on the spot to make a lot of free throws at the end. So it wasn't a 15-point game cushioned by a lot of late-game free throws. Michigan only attempted 9 free throws for the entire game, 6 of those by Derek Walton, and he was a perfect 6 for 6. So it was a 15-point blowout, as you mentioned. And Michigan, arguably one of the hottest teams going into this NCAA tournament, and they now look forward to that Midwest bracket with 3 Big Ten teams in it. We'll get to that in a little bit, but they're coming in as a 7th seed. I thought they probably could have earned a 6th seed with the way they had gone through the Big Ten tournament, but it is what it is. They're happy to take that 7th seed and see what they can do with it here starting next week.
Well, later this week, actually, because the big dance doesn't start until Thursday. I assume Michigan plays on either Thursday or Friday. We'll have to take a look at the schedule on that one.
Looks like they're playing on St. Patty's. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at Michigan State. Michigan will play noon, actually 12:15 on the 17th. So early St. Patty's Day for Michigan.
So in other words, you nailed it right on the head. Both Michigan and Michigan State will play on St. Patrick's Day, where we have to wear green all over the place. 12:15 on CBS against the 10th ranked the 10th seeded Oklahoma State Cowboys.
They're a good team as well. I think that was a surprising seed for them. They're a little bit of a diamond in the rough, a snake in the grass, but they played a pretty good Big 12 schedule, and Michigan cannot take them lightly. You can't take any team lightly in the NCAA tournament, not that they would, but they can't get looking ahead to that Louisville matchup simply because with all the adrenaline and all the events that they've had this past week, the last thing they want to do is take a big belly flop in the first round and really create some doubt in the minds of the people that were saying that they didn't deserve that 7th seed or maybe they weren't as good of a team as people thought. So I think that first round game for them is going to be key to really prove that they are the team that many, including the committee, thinks they are, which is one of the hottest teams entering this tournament.
Yep, and then the Michigan State Spartans will play the Miami, Florida Hurricanes Friday at 9:20 on TNT. 9th seed versus 8th seed. MSU is the 9th seed. Miami, Florida is the 8th seed. That's going to be a really good game.
Oh, it is. That 8-9 game is always a really nice game, and they're evenly matched for many reasons. Number one, they're seated very close together, so they should be. There's a lot of Michigan State fans that were thinking they would be a 10 seed this year. I know Ryan Schuing in the Schuing Report that both of you and I follow heavily, both on Twitter and his radio show in Lansing. He thought they were a 10 all the way, and they end up a 9. I think that's a blessing in disguise for them, number one, because they're in the bracket with Kansas, who is a perennial choke artist in the NCAA tournament, always seated high and always out before they think they should be. So Michigan State, if they can beat Miami, who's I think kind of plays the same style as Michigan State, so that should be interesting. Miami more of a physical defensive presence this year. I think that'll be an interesting matchup. But if Michigan State can pull that game out, and they'll play Kansas in that second round, Kansas didn't have Josh Jackson during the Big 12 tournament. He was out with an injury, so Michigan State could be coming into a little bit of a situation where they might get a break. If they can beat Kansas, if they somehow can advance to that Sweet 16, they're looking at a matchup down the road, in all probability, with the Purdue Boilermakers in that round. So that should be an interesting side of the bracket. Michigan wouldn't have to face a conference opponent until the Elite Eight, if that were the case. In Michigan, you look at their bracket. If they can beat Louisville, Oregon's down. They lost one of their better players for the year to a knee injury. So on that other side, Creighton is a decent Big East team. Rhode Island kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. They started out real nice. They were ranked for a while before they started to fall off a little bit in the A-10 conference season. So if you look at both sides of those brackets, I know it's tough to say, and probably the probability is really low. But you look at Michigan and Michigan State, how great would that Elite Eight matchup be if it was the 7th seed Michigan Wolverines and the 9th seed Michigan State Spartans coming from the opposite side of each other's bracket to meet in the Midwest Regional Final? Boy, that would be crazy.
Yeah, they almost met each other in the national championship game. There was one season where that almost happened. Can you believe that?
Right, I think that was the year that I think that was the year that Michigan ended up losing in the Elite Eight to Kentucky. Michigan State ended up advancing to the Final Four, and Michigan did not beat Kentucky in that Elite Eight game. And it would be crazy. I mean, at any point of the postseason, for those two teams to meet, but to do so at such a high level, not just a Big Ten championship, which we have seen before, but an actual berth to the Final Four at stake game. I can only imagine not only the ticket prices for that game, but just the atmosphere, especially being in the Midwest Regional. It's going to be a nice, easy jaunt for either fan of either team to get there, but they have to navigate a real tough road first, just like every other team in the stands. They have to navigate a very difficult and ever-changing path for them to be able to beat. But it's one of those things where you just kind of look at it, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's a very arguable point that both of those teams could advance that far in the tournament. So that's what's great about this time of year, is that literally there are very few situations or scenarios where you cannot make a point for that to happen. So it should be great this year. You have a 16 seed right now. North Carolina not playing good basketball down the stretch. They were kind of herky-jerky there. They lose to Duke in the ACC semifinal. They get the 16 seed Texas Southern team, who's coached by Mike Davis. Many people remember him from his days at Indiana. And also Michigan State fans remember Texas Southern, who came in to Breslin a couple years ago and gave them a game. And they have a very similar team this year, so it's hard to call that shot of a 16 beating a number one. But Texas Southern, boy, probably one of the better 16 seeds to come across in a while. And you just go up and down this bracket, so many great matchups and so many regionally centric matchups. Florida State playing Florida Gulf Coast University at Orlando. Should be a great game there. Northern Kentucky playing Kentucky. Northern Kentucky, the Horizon League winner, after they navigated that minefield of a conference tournament. They're able to win, get their first NCAA bid in only their 5th year as a Division I program. And the reward for that is they get to play in-state rival, or in-state cohort, I should say, Kentucky in the first round as a 15 seed. So a lot of great matchups, even the first 4. Providence and USC. Those two teams I thought were struggling, but they still deserved a spot. That should be a good game. And then the Kansas-Wake game as well. Kansas State and Wake Forest, two teams that should battle hard as 11 seeds. And we've seen the teams that come out of that play-in game. We've seen it before, Taylor, where that provides them momentum. Remember Shaka Smart and his VCU Rams making a run all the way to the Final Four from the play-in game where they beat Florida State. They didn't look back until they got to the Final Four. So many great matchups, and I love this time of year for college basketball, because literally at the drop of a hat, everything can change. And it's just a great thing to watch. And with all the TV channels now, TNT, CBS, and True TV all getting involved, you don't have to miss any of it. You can literally just go through, you can go in the March Madness app and watch all those live instead of waiting for them to come in or have tape delays. It's great, and it's really nice to be able to watch any of those 4 games going on at one time.
It definitely is. It would be a really nice treat to see Michigan and Michigan State go at it in an NCAA tournament matchup in any bracket in any year of the bracket.
Yeah, and like I said, looking at the other end, there's a lot of other games that could happen. I mean, Gonzaga and St. Mary's, they're in the West bracket together. Those two always duke it out. Or Arizona, who's the 2 seed in there. Boy, if they were to go chalk and meet in the regional final, Gonzaga played Arizona earlier this year. And if you didn't pay attention to Gonzaga's record, they didn't have any losses prior to March. So that means that they beat Arizona. And that would be an interesting rematch. You've got a lot of just great matchups that could happen. And I think that there was a lot of criticism given to this bracket, especially in the Midwest bracket where there are 3 Big Ten teams that reside there. But I think that overall there's some great theater to be had. We'll see what happens. I mean, you've got Virginia and Virginia Tech on the same side of the East bracket, which means they would meet perhaps if they were able to navigate through. I mean, Virginia Tech has a tall order. They have to go through Villanova to do it, but it could be for an East regional semifinal. But it's just, there's a lot of great theater that could be built in with the right matchups falling the right way. And like I said before, that's why I love this tournament more than any other basketball that I'm going to watch all year. It's because of all the things that can happen.
Speaking of basketball, the Pistons.
Touchdown, MS!
Pistons have now won 12 out of their last 17 games.
Left sideline, 3, and he answers.
They upset the Cleveland Cavaliers lately, 106-101, and then they smashed the Knicks 112-92. 4 out of the last 5, they smashed the 76ers, scoring 136 points and holding the Sixers to 106. They ground the Chicago Bulls at the Palace 109-95. They lose to the Pacers big time 115-98, trying to catch the Pacers for either 3rd or 2nd place in the Central Division before upsetting the Cavaliers by 5 points, 106-101, and then beating the Knicks. So the Pistons, still in 7th place in the Eastern Conference, they're just successfully trying to stay in the playoff picture.
Well, when I started going on with you on Talk Show, the Bulls were ahead of the Pistons, and the Bucks were slightly below the playoff picture, or the playoff line, so to speak. And since then, the Bulls have just been in a catastrophic freefall. Team descent, players unhappy, coaches unhappy, nobody's happy. And the last probably 2 months, since mid-January, have just been really in a free fall. And I really don't see them righting the ship anytime soon. You've got the Bucks, who are right now a half a game behind the Pistons. And the Pacers, who have come back to the pack, they were 7 games above 500 in the middle of January. And now they're only 2 games above 500. I think the one thing that I see here is that really that 6 through 8 spot. I think that there's probably going to be those 3 teams at the end of the season. You get the Pacers, Pistons, and Milwaukee out of the Central Division. It's just going to depend on where they fall. I think the one downside for the Pistons is their road record is not very good. Very, very difficult for them to win on the road. At home, they've been sparkling, 22-12, sixth best in the conference. So they're a pretty good home team, as they should be. But they have a really dismal road record. I think that's going to hurt them because when you look at the playoffs, obviously if you're a 6, 7, or 8 seed, you're starting at the other team's place. And that's really been the dividing line because if you look at the Atlanta Hawks on up, the Eastern Conference hierarchy, all of those road records from the Hawks on up, the 5 seed to the 1 seed Cavaliers are all in the positive. And you got the 6, 7, and 8 seed teams from the Central Division, all in the negative. So if there's one thing to really kind of glean from all those stats, it's that they're really poor performers away from home. And if I'm the Cavs, the Wizards, or the Celtics right now in the top 3 spots, I'm licking my chops because I'm going to get the first 2 games against those teams, no matter how good they are. They're not very good away from their own court. And if they can get a quick 2-0 lead, then they can make a quick series out of, or hopefully make a quick series out of it and get to the second round. So, saying all that, the Pistons, I think, really have, they really were not good 2 months ago. They're really, kind of looking disjointed. I think the trade deadline, not moving Drummond or Jackson, was a bit of a surprise just because of all the talk that happened. But they're right there at 500, and if they could stay that way, or at least improve a little bit, maybe win a couple more games on the road, pass the Pacers, get into that 6th spot. I don't know if they can get that. I don't know if they can get to the 5 spot with Atlanta. I think Atlanta is just going to be good enough to keep that 5 spot to themselves. I think that the Pistons can get to the 6th spot, play the Celtics in that first round. Maybe they can surprise the Celtics, who are relatively inexperienced when it comes to playoffs. They're about the same level as the Pistons as far as playoff experience. So maybe they can draw an edge there, and then we'll see what happens. But the Pistons, I think that the biggest work for them is going to come in the off season after they are eliminated for the playoffs, whatever round that is, simply because they've got a lot of work to do. I think that you've got Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson, both who are really polarizing figures on that team. And you have KCP, who's coming up, who assuredly will be offered a max deal, if not by the Pistons, by a host of other teams. So I think that it'll be a key offseason for them because they've made some improvement. They were the 8th seed last year. They're going to get to, hopefully, into the playoffs again. Hopefully a better seed than 8, so they don't have to play the Cavs again. And then see what happens. This is going to be a really tough offseason for the Pistons and Stan Van Gundy and Jeff Bauer, simply because there's a lot of moving parts, and the direction of this franchise is going to be determined a lot by what moves they make in July and August as free agency starts.
Yeah, my number one priority for them in the offseason is to decline Aaron Baines' option and promote Boban Marjanovic to the backup role if they decide to keep Andre Drummond.
Well, and then that's going to be the tough thing, too. I mean, if you decide to move Andre Drummond, which he was offered up in that trade for DeMarcus Cousins, the Kings said no. Vlade Divac decided to go a different route.
That's because the Kings didn't want a poor free throw shooter.
Well, and the fact of the matter is it was not the best trade for the Kings because they're getting one headache and they're getting another one in return. So it wasn't a good deal for them, at least on the non-basketball side. And that's probably their biggest consideration because they were moving Cousins simply because he had too much baggage in that town. And when the Pistons offered Drummond to him in whatever package that they had to work out, the Kings were not really getting a net benefit because they were getting somebody else who is sensitive. It does not mesh well with everybody. So I can see why that deal was knocked down. But if they decide to shop him in the off season, it's going to be key to see what they get back in return. Because as you mentioned, Aaron Baines right now, they have an option on him. If they decide to shop Andre Drummond, they're going to have to look at exercising that option, because if they're moving Drummond and not getting somebody in return, what they'll be getting is somebody in the draft to cover the five. And with that added experience, they're going to want somebody who's got some NBA minutes. And unfortunately for you, and
right,
whatever heartburn medication you have to take when you watch him, it'll probably be Aaron Baines having his option exercised and him going for another year.
Right, because it's as if they wouldn't have any other choice. If they move Drummond, and they would have to keep Baines and name him the number one center, and still have Boban Marjanovic as a backup. It's kind of a fair deal.
Right. I mean, depending on what they get in return. Now, the Kings, when they offered Drummond, obviously they were trying to get somebody that could play in the middle in return. That was DeMarcus Cousins, but that didn't happen. And so now you're looking at, again, if you can't get somebody in a trade, you're going to have to go the draft or free agency route. I just don't see anybody in the free agency route that's going to be playing a center role that's going to be palatable for them.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
At least the one that they're going to spend the money for. Because if you're getting rid of Drummond, it's telling me that you're going to set that's KCP's money, pretty much. So there's no reason you're not going to go spend big on another center if you can get rid of Drummond.
Right. And some think Drummond and KCP are either great to elite players if they range it, but no, they're not quite. They're not quite in that range. Drummond gets his doubles most games. KCP is good at shooting threes and all, but I wouldn't call them totally great or elite. That'd be too much.
Andre Drummond really is probably a product of the fact that there's just not that many true centers that are able to get those double-doubles. He's a horrendous free throw shooter.
Yeah.
He is indifferent on defense at times. He's a known malcontent in the locker room. He's getting the money he's getting because the market for those types of players is very thin. Reggie Jackson is another situation altogether. Again, is he a top point guard? No. He's barely a point guard. But again, because of where they were at, they were forced to give him that max deal, because if they didn't, their backcourt would look significantly different than it did this year, and they were going to get nothing in return. So I think that they did the right things by keeping them, but at the same time, those salaries don't reflect their true ability.
No, they don't. So it's almost like a waste of money, but it's kind of in between a waste of money and great production, leading the Pistons to where they need to be.
Well, and that's where this offseason is going to be so pivotal for, because they've come to really a crossroads. They've come to, do we keep Drummond and Jackson and lose KCP, knowing that he's their best perimeter defender, and as an outside shooter, he has very few peers in the NBA. If you're saying that you're going to give him up, you're going to let him walk, what you're saying is that you're building with Drummond and Jackson. You're building around them, and you're looking to be more of a defensively oriented team that is going to try to keep the score manageable. If you get rid of at least Drummond, if not both he and Jackson, and keep KCP, I think they look more towards a more mobile offense, less of a half-court set, and more of a, maybe like I wouldn't say a run and gun because I don't think that's something that they would be able to do, but at least a little bit faster pace and not having the ball have to go through the middle most times or most possessions. And I think that they could look at something like that. Something like the Spurs are doing this year without Tim Duncan. If you watch them play, the ball doesn't go through the middle as much anymore. It kind of stays out in the perimeter. Kawhi Leonard, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, those guys are keeping the ball on the outside, and it's going inside on a rare occasion versus when it was Tim Duncan there, that was your first option. I think that the Spurs have shown, obviously they have one of the great coaches, Greg Popovich, but they've shown that they can adapt, and it's really, I think, helped them this year because it's like Tim Duncan was never there. I mean, they're playing just as good at basketball now as they were last year. And they've really kind of changed how they play offense. And it's something that if the Pistons chose to go that way, KCP would be my first choice to keep in that backcourt over Reggie Jackson.
Mm-hmm. That would be a good idea. Now, transitioning from basketball to hockey, the Red Wings.
Okay, so you'll put the heartburn acid down, and I will pick it up. So let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Red Wings decided to scratch Anthony Mantha for 2 straight games. They beat the Blackhawks 4-2 at Joe Louis Arena without Mantha and Friday night, and then they lost badly to the New York Rangers 4-1 without Mantha tonight. And not only were the Rangers playing like a good team, the Red Wings were turning the puck over all game long, and that gave the Rangers so many scoring chances that they scored 4 goals on Peter Mrazek. And Jeff Blashill kept lying to the media that he thinks Anthony Mantha is going to be a good player. He's still developing. We get it. It's his first year. He came late, but here's why he came late. Jeff Blashill thought Anthony Mantha got in his face to want an opportunity in the NHL along with Andreas Athanasiou. They managed to keep Athanasiou in the NHL level with the Wings from going into opening night in Tampa in St. Petersburg, and then Mantha in November was called up due to I think either Joachim Anderson's injury or Drew Miller's injury, or something like that, or Tomas Jurko might have been injured. I think I'm starting to remember that. But since Mantha was called up, he never even got sent down. He managed over 35 points, not quite over 35, but 33 the last I checked, maybe 34 or 35, but that's a pretty damn good amount of points that Mantha has racked up the entire season in his time in the NHL. That's less than how many games since day one to this point. Comparing to Justin Abdelkader's, Luke Glendenning's, Riley Sheahan's still 0 goals. Nick Cronwall finally got a goal.
Yeah, he's got 33 points. He was 14 and 19 for 33.
Yep.
And, you look at the whole situation. The 2 games this weekend really encapsulate the struggles for Detroit. I can see it's not something that makes me happy, but I can see why you healthy scratch him against the Blackhawks. It's a big game. And say, look, you've got to play on the defensive end just as much as play the offensive end. And as much as it pains me, I get why they scratched him for Friday. It makes no sense to me point's been made. But you're playing a team that really, coming into tonight, is down. Lundqvist is out, so you're getting their backup.
Antti Ranta by name.
Yeah, and you're not playing the Rangers at full strength. Why would you not want your best lineup that you can put out there to play that game? And that's kind of what's encapsulated this whole season. Is they beat Chicago. They had a really good effort. Not only did the message get across to Mantha, but I think they got across to some of the other guys on the team that, you know, they're willing to scratch one of their leading scorers because he's not playing two-way hockey.
It's understandable.
We should probably get our butts in gear as well. And they really played a pretty good game against the Blackhawks.
Yeah, they did. I have to admit that. We all have to admit that.
And then they scratch him tonight for what? I mean,
absolutely
nothing. He couldn't prove anything Friday other than he was mad about it and wanted to be back in the lineup. And so you go scratch him again. Now, what is the message sending to him now that you're sending to him now? That you scratched him 2 times in a row.
Are you out of your mind?
You're going to keep a winning lineup out there? And that's what Blashill so maddeningly does, is he says, well, we're going to keep a winning lineup. Well, that's great. Except for the fact that you're now putting him, being Mantha, you're putting him in a difficult spot because now you're scratching him for another game just so you can have a winning lineup, and they get dusted by the Rangers. I mean, just a really poor effort against a team that they should be able to at least compete with. And now if you bring him back in, I mean, it's a lost season already. You're not going to make the playoffs. But at this point, the best thing for him to do is play.
Yep.
They scratched after the CU earlier in the season. He came back with a 3-point game. They scratched Mantha. Who's to say what he would have done against the Rangers? We'll never know.
Right. Because in that game, they kept turning the puck over.
Right. I mean, it's not it wasn't a defensive breakdown today. It was poor puck. It was poor puck security. It's not the reason he was scratched. I mean, it'd be different if he was given away every other shift in his own zone. That wasn't the issue. And yet you have guys that are coming in on a nightly basis and turning the puck over, making bad decisions, yet they're still playing. So it's okay to do that, but it's not okay to not play hard defensively. I mean, there's a lot of problems with this team, but I think that like I said, the frustrating part is that you're now going and you're saying, okay, we're benching him for defensive reasons. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it worked. They got a good effort against Chicago. You bring him back, he's ready to go. He probably would have, played a pretty good game based on what we've seen with the other times that young guys have been scratched. Yet there's other guys in that team that hit the ice on a nightly basis. Justin Abelkader, Darren Helm, guys of that ilk, they're not getting scratched.
Dylan Larkin,
What are you trying to say? Yeah, I mean, Dylan Larkin competes, but he just isn't scoring.
Right.
And it's just, for a young player, it's hard to fathom what is going through Mantha's mind right now. He's like, what do I got to do to get back in the lineup if these guys are doing what they're doing out there? And it's just hard to say with this team. There's just not a real sense of direction, and we could go on and on about their struggles, but it's just a baffling move in my mind to scratch them for another game when the point's been made and other guys are making mistake after mistake, and they keep getting rewarded with ice time. And I know it goes back to the veterans and how the Red Wings really hold dear to fading philosophy that veterans are the linchpin of your team. But I mean, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by not having him in the lineup on a consistent basis. Him being Mantha again, it doesn't make sense, and that's the most frustrating part about this year. Is just there's not a lot of things that make sense as far as the lineup decisions are concerned, because you're hurting for goals, you're not scoring well as a team, and you're taking out one of your better scorers for now 2 games. We'll see what happens in the next game if he's able to get back to the lineup. But why would you take him out again? You know, this whole winning lineup thing it's not what winning teams do. Winning teams don't say, well, we're just going to keep the same lineup in until we lose. You know, teams aren't doing that. They're putting their best team on. They're putting their best 12 forwards, their best 6 defensemen out there on a nightly basis. And the Red Wings just aren't doing that. And it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and Jeremy Roenick and Mike Milbury pointed out those turnovers on the ice. When the Red Wings were getting ready to go on the attack, when they crossed the blue line, they tried to dump the puck in, and it resulted in a turnover. And they made very inaccurate passes, which ended up in turnovers. The Rangers kept taking it the other way down the ice, and Jeff Blashill's not just says keep on going. Jeff Blashill, just like Tigers manager Brad Ausmus, has no sense of urgency. Jeff Blashill still does not put Mantha on the ice, and just keeps the lineup the same, just because the Red Wings beat the Blackhawks 4-2. And he thinks, hey, we'll be good enough to beat the Rangers without Anthony Mantha. Wrong.
And not to say that Mantha would have been the key point in them winning, because the turnovers that were being made are, you know, those are things that have been going on all season from the usual suspects. But to your point, it wouldn't have hurt to have him out there.
No,
it certainly wouldn't have been a detriment at this point.
It would have helped.
Yeah, and that's been the frustration for many a Wings fan this year, is just the lineup decisions are seemingly being made with. They're trying to say they're developing the young kids, and that's fine. But it's hard for me to look at that lineup and say that's a lineup that we're going to be able to win with every night when Mantha's not in that lineup. And like I said, again, it was a hard lesson to learn. If they scratch him against Chicago, I think that was a desired effect, to scratch him against Chicago, bring him back tonight, and really see what he could do. And at the same time, you have guys that are veterans that are making big money, making the same mistakes over and over and over again with no fear of any retribution. And when you're the young players, you just have to look at that and think, gee, you know, I mean, it'd be nice if I could make a mistake and not have to worry about it. But now these guys like Double A and Mantha, and even to a lesser extent Mrazek early in the year when he and Carreau were trading nights, or they had Carreau going for a while. It's just hard to follow what they're exactly trying to accomplish by having these lineup decisions. And I think that for Jeff Blashill, he's only able to use the pieces that he has. But when you're taking one of your big pieces out, just for the sake of, well, we won the last game,
or that he's trying to watch how they play just to developmentally over like for the second game in a row.
Right. I mean, you're developmentally, you want him to come back in that game. That's typically how that goes with young players. You scratch them and say, "Hey, you got to be better," and then you win that game. And you think, "Oh, he'll come back with a stronger effort, which will make our team better, and we'll get our point across." Yet they scratch him again. And that's just been the frustrating point. And I think this off season is going to be big for them. They have a lot of kicks in the can at the draft, and they have some decisions to make contract wise, and they're going to have to really try to work to get some flexibility in the cap to be able to make some more of those decisions. Tomas Tatar is a restricted free agent. You're not going to be able to give him much more money unless they find it somewhere else. And they've got a lot of bad contracts on this team.
Mm-hmm.
And the trading deadline, everybody thought they did this tremendous job. I thought they could have done more. And now they're faced with an off season that they're going to have to try to do the best they can and get back to a competitive level, which I think is possible if they could get rid of some of those bad contracts. But I just don't see it happening, and that's really going to retard their growth for the next couple of years, trying to get through some of those bad contracts to get enough support for those guys who are producing, who are playing at a high level. I mean, it's just difficult to watch because they're really spinning their wheels here, and there's not much hope in sight for the near future. Barring anything miraculous happening in the offseason.
Yeah, and sorry to say, but if the Red Wings are going to keep some of their long-term contract players who continue to, play awfully, play that awful, it's going to be another long season after another from their inaugural season at Little Caesars Arena on forward, and that's going to make Red Wings fans everywhere seasick.
Well, and then they've got a new arena next year, so they're going to be able to sell tickets. Why? Because it's a new place. People are going to go. Their competitiveness isn't going to drive ticket sales next year. I mean, that's just a business fact. They're going to be able to sell. They're going to be able to sell that place out, night in, night out. They kind of get a walk next year. It's the year after that they're really going to have to start driving towards showing that they're competitive again. And with all these contracts and the way that those players are performing under them, it's hard to see that happening.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to be another 3 year. It's going to be another 2.5 or 3 more years before the Red Wings can even make it to make it back to the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, and it doesn't get any easier because the other teams are going to be making moves and getting better. And yeah, there will be some teams that get worse. That's how professional sports goes. But on the surface, when you look at their roster stacked up against some of the other teams, it's a long road to hoe. I mean, they're the worst team in the Eastern Conference, only because, and the only reason they have company is because New Jersey is going to do a complete nosedive. And, New Jersey, being New Jersey, they haven't been really been competitive for the last 2 or 3 years, but I mean, if you're the Red Wings, you're in a spot that you're not used to being in, and the roster, when you look at it, I mean, there's guys signed for the next 3 or 4 seasons that are not performing to what they're getting money-wise. Helman and Advocator are the 2 biggest examples. Gus Nyquist is another. I mean, those 3 guys are taken up right now almost, let's see, 4, so that's 9, almost $13 million in contracts that are just not doing it for you. And when you're got three of your top players forward-wise, as far as salary, not pulling their weight, it makes it a real difficult process for you to get better.
That's understandably true. And if you look at the Arizona Coyotes are now within 7 points of the Red Wings, 6 within the New Jersey Devils. And that's got to be surprising because we never thought the Arizona Coyotes were going to be red hot as of late and actually catch up with the Wings and Devils at this point. But they actually have. They're coming closer, 7 points away. The Wings could be on the verge of being the second worst. Either the Wings or the Devils could be the second worst team in the NHL if the Coyotes keep it up and the Red Wings and Devils keep tanking. Could go either way.
And to your point, Arizona, look at their lineup. Young kids up and down that lineup. They're not playing guys who are past their prime of their careers. They're playing young players. And they're starting to get, they're getting hot, as you said. But they have a lot of guys who are right now in the beginning stages of their career, and they're playing really well. And I mean, if you're the Red Wings, why aren't you employing that strategy? You're not going to make the playoffs. Let's see some of those kids and see what they can do. For the pure fact that you're going to want to know that heading into the off season, you can make decisions even though the sample sizes are not that big. You can at least make an educated decision based on what you've seen them do at the NHL level. And it's so difficult now to watch the Red Wings consistently start the guys that they're starting and play the guys that they're playing simply because it's of no benefit to them to have some of those guys in the lineup. When there are other guys that can take that spot, probably perform at a replacement level or above. And now you can go into an offseason saying, okay, we know what those guys can do. We're confident that we know that it's not big enough sample size to make a real rash decision. But we can at least gather some information and use that starting with the off season and really try to see what we can do with this roster. And again, it goes back to the construction of this roster. Too many bad contracts, not enough room under the cap, and it's just they're just not in a spot where they can do that, and they've really kind of tied their own hands in that regard. And instead of being able to develop guys and try to get back to competitiveness sooner rather than later, they're kind of stuck in this morass of mediocrity just because they don't have any flexibility with bringing guys in and playing them. And they've got a lot of draft picks coming up, but those guys, I mean, you're not going to have a lot of NHL players coming out of those picks that are going to be ready.
Right, because most of them are third rounders, and one of them is a sixth rounder. This is and that's the difference between how Ken Holland has generally managed this now awful Red Wings roster to how the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes has properly worked his roster. The Coyotes are, like you mentioned, have a younger talent after the trade deadline. The Red Wings traded Vanek, Ott, Smith, and Yurko for mostly third-round picks, a sixth-rounder and a second-rounder, and a defenseman, Dylan McElrath. I mean, I don't even know who the hell he is, but...
Well, he was the Rangers made him a top 10 pick, and he never panned out. And if you look at Dylan McElrath, he comes from the Western Hockey League.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Ken Holland's forte before he became the general manager. He takes guys from the Western Hockey League. He seems to love guys from that league. And for whatever reason, they took him on. I mean, I guess the positive spin you could put on that is that he's a physical player. He's a bottom pair defenseman that will do the dirty work physically. And your only hope is that because they thought Jonathan Erickson would be that guy somewhere down the line in his career, that maybe they can get rid of his awful contract to somebody. Maybe Las Vegas takes him, or maybe some team that needs to spend to the floor will be able to take him. And that's really your only hope, is that they're thinking, gee, we could probably bring him back and have him be the physical presence that they desperately need on that defensive end, or at least if it's not Michael Rath, because he is an unrestricted free agent this offseason, somebody that's going to be able to do that job. Because really, aside from the poor defensive effort as far as turning the puck over and doing all the other myriad of things that they're not doing well, they just don't have a physical presence. And, you watched the Rangers game tonight, even when the Rangers weren't scoring off of turnovers, they just don't have anybody that can really physically set the tone. And it really would be nice to have somebody that was able to do that. I mean, they haven't had anybody that does that on a consistent basis since Brad Stewart played. And it's something that it's not an integral part of your team, but it's nice to have. And they just don't have that element right now. And I think it does hurt them in a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm. So the Red Wings likely to miss the playoffs, still on the bottom four in the NHL. The Golden Knights, keep in mind, have the top 3 draft pick. The Coyotes still second worst in the NHL. That's all sorted out. So let's get to some Lions here.
Touchdown, Detroit
Big
Lions!
free agency moves that the Lions made this past week. The Lions get Akeem Spence, Paul Warlow, never heard of that guy, but Cornelius Washington from the Bears, and now today, T.J. Lang. Wasn't he from the Packers?
He was. He was a Packers free agent who actually spurned the Packers and signed with his hometown team, the Lions. And if you look at all the free agent additions for the Lions, I, being a Bears fan, can tell you that Cornelius Washington is one of those diamonds in the rough, that he was a really good prospect for them, but they weren't willing to go to that amount of money for him, which, it probably makes sense business-wise for them. But, I mean, the Lions picked up Rick Wagner, who is arguably the best tackle on the free agent market. Mm-hmm. They pick up T.J. Lang at right guard.
Big one.
Paul Warlow is a one-year depth signing for them. He was very good for Atlanta 2 seasons ago, but last year kind of fell off production-wise. Akeem Spence was a valued free agent at the defensive tackle spot. Mentioned Washington. Mm-hmm. They also signed D.J. Hayden, who was a good bargain signing at quarterback. They got Darren Fells at tight end, who probably will fill that void of a blocking tight end that they just have never had. They also got kick returner Keyshawn Martin, the former Spartan. They bring him in, knowing that they probably were not going to be able to retain Andre Roberts. So I think that Bob Quinn probably gets an A for his free agency period, simply because he filled what needs he could. He wasn't going to go out and make a big multi-year signing after Rick Wagner. And so I feel like the Lions shored up what they needed to do with what they could on the free agency side. Defensively, I still think that they probably could stand to have a couple of more pieces. They released DeAndre Levy.
Yeah.
and that was a surprising move, simply because it caught a lot of people off guard, and they have some work to do at linebacker, but I think they feel like they can draft some people in the first three rounds to fill those gaps. The other thing I look at this is you sign Wagner, you sign Lang to replace Warford and Reif, who left via free agency. I think that's an upgrade for both of those spots, being with Wagner and Lang. and you forget that, they're going to have to re-sign Stafford next year because Stafford's contract is coming up. And if they don't extend him, they're going to have to see what they're able to do, whether they franchise him or see what they can do to get a multi-year extension. But those moves are designed specifically, I think, with Stafford in mind.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that they were not good at offensively was protecting the quarterback. And
especially the offensive
Wagner and
line.
Lang are going to bring that element in now. And I think that will help their case when they go to Matt Stafford and say, hey, look, we might not be able to pay you the most money that all these other teams are able to, but we can sure as heck keep you clean. We're going to put a good offensive line in front of you so that you don't have to pick yourself off the turf every play. And they're making a concerted effort, Bob Quinn and his staff, to show Matt Stafford that they are not only serious about contending and playing well, but protecting their franchise quarterback. I think those were two very key moves that Bob Quinn made. We'll see how they pan out, but on the surface, if I'm Matt Stafford, I'm a lot happier than I was a week ago with the offensive line that I'm going to be behind to start 2017.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's more like taking the first 3 steps to success. Just gotta keep on going.
Right. I mean, running back is still a concern for them. I don't think that they have a lot of depth there. I know that Amir Abdullah, who was their first-round draft pick a couple of years ago, I don't think he's produced to the level that they thought he would, obviously. Theo Riddick had some injury problems, and he hasn't really done what they thought he would do. If they could keep those guys healthy.
It should be noted, It should be noted that Amir Abdullah was injured for the rest of the season during Game 3, the Lions' home opener against the Tennessee Titans, in a very disappointing 16-15 loss in Week 3 in 2016. Amir Abdullah probably tore his ACL, or I can't remember it.
Yeah, and again, it's not to. I'm not saying Amir Abdullah has disappointed to the point where they need to release him or anything. It's more of the fact that you don't count on him being injured for the whole year. But when a running back has a leg injury, especially in the knee area, it's so hard to come back from that as a football player.
Yeah.
So you're looking at him you're hoping he can come back and be what you thought he was going to be coming out of Nebraska. I know he had some fumbling problems as well up to that injury point. But if you can get a solid running game, which is something that they lack this year, to give Stafford some breaks so that he doesn't have to throw 45 passes a game, getting him better protection, I think that'll benefit them in the long run. Like I said, defensively, they still have some work to do, especially in the secondary. But I think that they now feel that they can fill those holes in the draft, or at least attempt to fill those holes, and be more competitive. One factor on this that weighs more heavily than who you sign and where they play is the coaching. And Jim Caldwell and his staff now have been given the tools to succeed. And I think we'll find out this year very quickly when the season starts. If they start off poorly, that's one thing to look for is, do they keep Jim Caldwell and his staff around, or do they decide to make a move and see who they can get, to fill the rest of that season and moving forward? I think the worst thing that could happen for the Lions right now in the season to come would be a slow start, simply because the tools have been given to Jim Caldwell. There are very few excuses now that he has to say, well, we didn't have this, or hey, we didn't have that, or this guy wasn't doing this. I mean, the tools are there for the Lions. And it's something that they were missing dearly, both on the defensive and offensive lines. They just didn't have the horses. They've gone a long way in really fortifying those spots. Now it's up to the coaching staff to get those players to play at a consistent, high level and really show the talent that they have.
Yeah, and it all boils down to Jim Caldwell's in-game decisions, whether to go for it on 4th and 1 from inside the 40, or just punt it away, which is a lot illogical because you got Matt Prater as your kicker, or just throw an immature challenge. And
not only that, but you have a defense that is not stopping teams.
Right, especially the secondary.
Right, I mean, it's great to punt the ball. And being a Bears fan, I've seen that game before, where you're punting from the opponent's 35. The difference is that you're pretty confident that you're going to get that ball back in a good field position, or maybe you can create a turnover deep in your opponent's end to get that offensive short field. That wasn't the case with the Lions defense. They weren't able to do that. And I think that what they do now in free agency, they still have a lot of folks that they're looking at. When you look at their unrestricted free agents that they still have available to them that were on their roster last year, Josh Bynes, who I think they'll probably re-sign. But you look at some of the other guys, I mean, there's just not a whole lot there. I mean, they're really trimming the fat on this roster, and it's going to come down to, can they get the performance out of those guys that they've signed? Can they get the performance that they're paying for?
Mm-hmm. That's the question. We will have to find out later this year.
That one is
one team to cover. Lastly, the Tigers. They've been getting shelled in spring training action. It doesn't count. The results don't count, but they do matter. That's the Michigan Sports Truth's preseason philosophy. It doesn't count, but it always matters.
Right.
Most games they keep getting routed. The last one being 7-1 Saturday afternoon to the Yankees. But yesterday the Tigers came back with Michael Fulmer on the mound, down 3-0 to come back and beat the New York Mets in Lakeland 4-3. And Tyler Collins was activated from his strained lateral muscle injury. He returns to the center field position race. Regardless of, and Jason Beck reported that in one of his articles that regardless of Tyler Collins' injury, Tyler Collins is likely to have a platoon spot in center field, with either Anthony Gose or Jacoby Jones or Mikey Matuk. But Mikey Matuk has been awful this spring. Even Anthony Gose, even Anthony Gose and Jacoby Jones and Tyler Collins individually have been outplaying Mikey Matuk, for God's sake.
That was not something that they were planning on at all. They brought Matuk in that they were hoping that he would, if he wasn't going to win the spot outright, at least give them a solid platoon option along with, as you mentioned, those other three guys. Somebody out of those three was going to be able to step up and become a viable option. I think that the bonus for Jacoby Jones is he's also flexible enough to play the infield as well, as we saw in last season. So I think he's got that going for him. That said, if he's not able to show that he is worthy of playing a consistent amount of games, I think he'll probably end up in Toledo, simply because you can't leave him on the roster to be a utility guy or a bench guy when he needs more at-bats. He needs more playing time. And if you can't give that to him, then I think you've got to put him in Toledo simply so that he can get more time in the field. Hitting-wise, he's doing okay this spring. But defensively, he's got to get those reps in center field. He's got to get those outfield reps. And if he's not going to be able to do that, they're going to have to put him back in Toledo. They're going to have to go with either Collins or Ghost. Probably going to be Collins just because of his experience and the fact that Anthony Ghost really doesn't bring anything to the table offensively that they hoped he would when they got him. And that kind of leaves Matuk on the outside looking in. As you mentioned, this spring for Matuk has just been disastrous. An .074 batting average and just not looking good overall. And I think that that's still a sore spot for them is center field.
Especially when they gave up Maben to the Angels for
right. I mean, they gave up and Maben in that ill-fated trade to the Angels decided to decline his option this year. You know, you look back, if they keep him, at least he gives you a steady presence in center field, and he was actually effective offensively for them, especially when they had some rough patches last year. He was one of their better hitters, and they decided not to keep him, and now they're going to be kind of paying the price for that by hoping they can patchwork something together in center field. And, when you look at the center field candidates, they bring in Omar Infante even as a free agent. And now he's in that mix because he has center field experience and center field capability. And he's kind of that wild card where if they think he's the best person to put in center field offensively, they probably will live with his defensive liabilities simply because he brings more to the table in the lineup than any of the other guys that we've mentioned so far.
Yeah, and it was reported by Jason Beck that Omar Infante won't see much time in center field. So I assumed he will probably see more time in the middle infield. He has more because he has more experience at second base than in center field.
Right. I mean, their hope is that they don't have to use him there. But I mean, when you look at the stats of the guys that are trying to make the club at center field, Jacoby Jones hitting .318, and like you said, it doesn't count, but it does matter. I mean, Jacoby Jones is hitting .318 right now, but can you trust him over the course of the season? And then you go down to the pile of mess that Ghost, Collins, and Matuk have been at the plate, and you have to look at that and say, is our best bet having Jacoby Jones, even though he has limited major league experience, making him your main center fielder, and having somebody like a Tyler Collins or an Omar Infante spell him from time to time to get the most he can out of this offense? And that's going to be the question for them is really every other position is spoken for and solidified offensively for them. You look at the rotation as well. Pitching-wise, it's been a train wreck, as you mentioned. None of the players that they were hoping would really fill those 4 and 5 spots have done anything of note other than give up gopher balls. And you're really looking at a rotation that is in flux. When you're getting into the second week of March, now heading into the third week, that's not a great position to be in. And for the Tigers right now, I think that their main focus is probably their rotation more than it is that center field spot because, as you mentioned, it's been a real struggle for guys that are competing for those 4 and 5 spots, and that's something to watch as well.
Yep. So the only thing the Tigers need to do is just stay healthy and play well despite Brad Ausmus's dumb decisions. Brad Ausmus still has no sense of urgency whatsoever. Like I mentioned earlier, I still don't think the Tigers are going to go too far if they even make the postseason.
Well, the thing for them is the Central Division.
Yep.
If they can just stay healthy
Yep.
and play decent baseball, other than Cleveland, there's not a whole lot in front of them.
Right.
I mean, I think that they're better. They're still a better team than the White Sox.
Mm-hmm.
The Royals are are a little bit of a decline. They've had some tragedy and some things strike them in this offseason. So they're in flux. And then you have also the Twins, who are just perennially bad and are anywhere near to competing. They were near competing on a consistent basis in that division. I mean, the road has been paved for them to at least compete for a wild card, if not a division crown. And if they can just stay healthy and get consistent performances from the guys that they have on their roster, it's there for the taking. It's there for them, but they have to perform. And the pitching right now is not good as far as the bottom spots. And that center field spot for the Tigers is going to be a sore spot. But again, they're not playing in a division where they need to win 95 games to win. They don't need that. They don't need to go that far. They don't need to be that successful. But they have to be at least competitive over the course of the season. And you look at last year, if they just actually played Cleveland 500, they would have won the division. They didn't. And they ended up missing the postseason because of it. So if they can get better in their own division, then they'll be in a good spot come September and maybe make a push for the playoffs. We'll see what they're able to do at the trade deadline. But from this point, it looks a little iffy. But the saving grace for them is that their division, on paper, does not look strong.
No, the division doesn't look strong. The Tigers either barely win the AL Central or just come up short of it and still win the AL wild card. And they still won't go too far in the postseason, unfortunately.
No, I don't think they're built for a postseason run.
No,
at all.
Especially with the manager they have right now in their dugout, because Al Avila must know that Brad Ausmus is not the guy that can take him to a World Series title. One they haven't won since the year I was born, 1984.
Yeah, and that's going to be the key. We just talked about with the Lions, and now we're going to the Tigers. Same thing. It all hinges upon the coaching. We talked about with the Red Wings, the consistent pattern we've had with these last three conversations is the coaching.
Yep.
Is it good enough to get the team that they've been given?
Not nearly.
To another level. And I just don't think any of those guys, Caldwell, Blashill, and Ausmus, I don't know if they're good enough. Well, I shouldn't say I don't know.
They're not.
I don't think, I know they're not, based on their past resumes, to get the teams that they've been given and make them perform at a maximum level.
No, not even. There's only one. Oh, there's only the Pistons still have Stan Van Gundy. He just doesn't play Boban Marjanovic in big time moments in a game where the Pistons need Boban Marjanovic the most. Against.
I will say that, for Van Gundy at least, yeah, I don't agree with him not playing Boban, but his handling of the backcourt, especially with Reggie Jackson's struggles and KCP coming to the fore a little bit, I think Sam Van Gundy has really managed his bench very well, and that's why they're in the position that they're in right now.
I'd have to agree. So I think that's all the material that is covered for episode 255 of the Michigan Sports Truth postgame edition. Not the postgame. Episode 255 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker. Buck, great to have you here on Spreaker. How's your experience here?
It's great. I really enjoy talking with you. Mm-hmm. And, I feel that this is a good forum. And just like I've said, I'm not one that's going to be, I'm not a fan that will look at things under a rose lens, so to speak. It's the Michigan Sports Truth for a reason.
Yep.
And that's what we're here to do. We're here to tell the truth, no matter if it's bad or good.
Right.
And I think that we were able to do that, and I'm excited to see how some of being a big Tigers fan, I'm really I'm excited to see how that plays out, because I think that they've got the foundation in place. But you and I have mentioned it's all in the coaching, and I think that would be the one theme for tonight. If you had to put a title to this episode of Michigan Sports Truth, is they don't have the coaching talent. And you're talking about the professional sports franchises in Michigan.
Right.
Aside from the Pistons, maybe the coaching is really, aside from all the roster problems, the coaching is the one thing that could stand to be upgraded for all three of those teams that we just talked about.
Yes, Tigers, Lions, and Red Wings. They're all in trouble. What did you? Oh, by the way, what did you think about when you read this latest article from Jeff Moss about Kelly Ilitch telling friends that the Tigers and Red Wings will be sold? What'd you make of it?
Well, Jeff does a really good job with what he does. He's a little bit more negative than we are, but that comes with the territory of being a Red Wings fan back in the bad times of the Dead Wings and so on. And the Lions fans and the Lions as far as they've gone back now almost 60 years. But the one thing that doesn't surprise me is that with Mike Ilitch's passing, this is something that had been rumored before Mike Ilitch actually passed away. This was something that people thought might happen simply because his family, Chris Ilitch, who right now is the CEO or the head of the Pistons now, the Red Wings and the Tigers, that's something that was rumored, and it doesn't surprise me at all that those rumors are starting to float about, because it's something that really has been talked about for the better part of almost 2 years now, that when Mike Ilitch finally passed, his family probably looked to divest themselves of those franchises, and with ready and willing buyers, Tom Gores on one side, Dan Gilbert on the other, plus any others that might be looking to spend some money and get a sports franchise, that the Tigers and the Red Wings, with their heritage and their standing in the community, will be very attractive to potential buyers. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that is something that is now coming out. It is coming out incrementally, with Jeff Moss reporting that Kelly Ilitch is making waves, or at least telling people that the Pistons or that the Tigers and Red Wings are going to be sold. And I think that's something we'll hear more of, especially as these seasons now, with the Red Wings almost finished, the Tigers now embarking on their 2017 season, that we'll start to hear more of, because I don't think that the Ilitch family, Olympia Entertainment, is looking to stay in that business. Simply because if you look at the moves that they're making, or that they're not making, those are not moves that are hinting at longevity for ownership. If you were looking at owning a team for a really long time, the moves that they're making wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. They're really making short-term, nearsighted moves, and that typically spells that somebody is going to be selling that team to get somebody else in place and let them make the bigger decisions, the long-term decisions that a new owner would want to make.
And the reason the reason for Kelly Ilitch telling friends that the Tigers and Wings will be sold was due to the family's intense concerns over tax issues. That's what Jeff Moss wrote. And then he also wrote in parentheses, another source indicated that the highest bidder most likely will not be Tom Gores, the owner of the Pistons. There's another hint. There's one hint as to whom it will be sold, as opposed to who it will not be sold to. And that's
right.
Tom Gores.
And when you have that type of situation, that was something that when people knew that Mike Ilitch was in failing health, that his family would have to maybe divest themselves of some interest because of those issues. And with them owning both those teams, they have a lot of debt that's kind of buried in the books of the Red Wings and the Tigers. And that was probably going to be the biggest sticking point, is you can probably get a good price for them, but how much of that price am I actually going to be putting into a team rather than buying back debt? And I think that'll be the one hurdle for them if they decide to sell, is the fact that they do have a lot of debt that is buried in the books of those two franchises, and how they negotiate getting out from under that and not killing the deal. Because Tom Gores has done a really good job since he's bought the Pistons in making money and building a successful team. At least the makings of one. Mm-hmm. If you were to buy the Red Wings or the Tigers, that's a little bit different story.
It's a very tall order.
Yeah, and the only upside for him is that he may be able to find a partner. Dan Gilbert's been mentioned as an interested party.
Yep.
There's a lot of ins and outs to this whole scenario if they decide to sell. But if they were able to negotiate a good deal for both sides, I think that they would go for it in a heartbeat, because instead of paying those taxes and having to deal with more debt and trying to find and bury it in those teams by way of cutting payroll, by way of sacrificing performance and marketability, that they would rather sell those teams and let the new owner deal with all those issues rather than try to deal with it themselves. And I think that's going to be the one thing we have to watch out for, is whoever's buying it, making sure they're committed to keeping a competitive product on the field, on the court, on the ice, without cutting payroll or trying to make money back that they had to spend because of that debt. I'm in the mortgage industry. It's kind of like buying a house. You're not going to buy a house with a bad roof.
No.
You're not going to buy a house that doesn't have a working furnace or something else like that. And the owner going into that is going to know that he can get a better price if he decides to help you out and cut him some slack. Hey, I'll give you less because I'm going to have to spend money to get you out of this hole with a bad roof or a bad furnace or whatever. that's the same principle in effect right now for any potential buyer of the Detroit Red Wings or the Detroit Tigers is you might not get top dollar for them because I'm going to have a whole bunch of debt that I'm going to have to deal with or that I'm going to have to satisfy so that I can get this team. And that's going to be the key point of the negotiation between Chris Ilitch and any potential buyer is finding that middle ground so they can receive a fair price. And the new owner is not working themselves out of a hole from day one. So it's exciting. I think that they could benefit, both teams could benefit from new ownership. But at the same time, you don't want it to be some long process where they're buying a team and then for the next 4 or 5 years they're trying to work out of a hole just because they want to own the team.
That's right. And now that we're hearing rumors from Kelly Ilitch about the sale of the Tigers and Wings, what that leads, one of the things that this leads to is the name of the new Little Caesars Arena. Might it change sometime soon to a different name?
You know, yet again, another piece to the negotiation. They bring up a valid point. You know, if you're Tom Gores, sure that he probably wouldn't be his first choice.
Now remember, Tom Gores will not be the most likely highest bidder of the Tigers and Wings.
Right.
So he's probably going to be out of it.
Yeah, and that's going to be the factor that, like we've talked about before, is you're going to have to bring some money to the table, knowing that you're going to have to work out of some of those debt or some of those issues that come with the territory. But at the same time, like you mentioned, if he's not the highest bidder, that will probably take him out because they're probably looking for somebody that's going to give them the most money so they can relieve themselves of their responsibilities on the way out. So it'll be interesting to see how that picture forms. And like I said, I think we'll see and hear more of that as the season for the Tigers goes on because they're not interested, the Ilitch family, they're not interested in drawing that out. If they're going to do it, they're going to want to do it sooner rather than later because of all the myriad tax issues and other things that they would have to face in keeping those franchises. So I think if a sale is going to happen, it would be sooner rather than later. But you're right. It's going to be somebody with a pretty fat wallet and the willingness to keep both of those teams in spots that they're at right now, especially with the Tigers who are coming up. This is the 17th season of Comerica Park, and it's considered ancient by MLB standards. You're probably looking at negotiating a stadium deal sooner rather than later, and that'll be a big part of it as well.
Absolutely. So, we're probably not going to guess that. That's guess which name their Little Caesars Arena may be changed to. That's going to be a waste of time there. That'll be quite silliness. But we've heard a few names from an article, but we're not going to bore you with those. So, with that being said, that does wrap up episode 255 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker. Buck, thanks again. We hope to do this again. We hope to form a roundtable on Spreaker with you, Frank, and Ed Smith one day in the near future.
That would be great. Always good to hear a lot of different perspectives. Yeah. I'm never one to admit, or I should say, I'm never one to say it right all the time. And discussions are healthy. It's always good to get different perspectives, simply because in sports especially, I mean, you never can be 100% wrong most of the time. I mean, and I think that hearing different perspectives from Frank and Ed, I follow them on Twitter as well, and it's always good to read their stuff and have good discussion and back and forth. And I think that's what you've presented is a good forum for us here to do that.
Absolutely. So, all right. With that being said, get some rest tonight, and right now, right now I'm going back to Talk Shoe tomorrow night if there's a game tomorrow night. I believe. Let's see here. The score.com mobile app has it.
Yeah, the Pistons will be playing Cleveland on Tuesday.
Yeah,
I know the Red Wings are off.
Red Wings are off until, let's see, upcoming. Tomorrow at the Tigers and the Washington Nationals go at it. Cleveland, Pistons and Cavaliers at 7 Tuesday. The Wings finally play the Colorado Avalanche at 9:30 on a Wednesday. The Red Wings may win that one by at least one goal or two, but who knows, right? The Avalanche
won't hold our breath.
Yep, and then the Wings are in Arizona at 10. The Arizona Coyotes might pull an upset in that game on Thursday night. Then on Saturday,
big 4-point game in the lottery.
Yeah. Then the Avalanche come to Joe Louis Arena at 1 p.m. I'm going to be having tomorrow off from tomorrow through Saturday as scheduled, but in a week or two I'm going to be working full time at Ruby Tuesday.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, with all that being said, for Buck Gino, on behalf of Ed Smith and Frank Vagner and Louis Tenor only on Talk Shoe, though, this is Taylor Phillips. Episode 256 on Spreaker will be apparently Wednesday night now because Ed Smith is going to be busy tomorrow and Tuesday. So Ed Smith and me, episode 256 on Spreaker, the Michigan Sports Truth. Tomorrow I'm not going to be on the air unless something happens. Then, if it does, then I'll have a special report coming up. But our next post-game podcast on Talk Shoe is Tuesday at, I believe, 10 o'clock. That's what it stands like. That's what it stands at right now. So, Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Follow Buck Gino on Twitter at BuckGino3I. Follow Frank Vagner at Frank_Vagner, VAJCNER. Follow Ed Smith 313 and add Louis Tenor on Facebook and like his Facebook page, Jespy Sports Podcast, and join his Facebook group, Jespy Sports Podcast, and like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth, and join the Facebook group, The Michigan Sports Truth. TTFN, ta-ta for now, bon appetit.